It's hardly surprising that I grew up baby mad because I was surrounded by them from a young age. First, Mum brought home my sister Felicity, Fizz, then Phoebe and Daisy, the big twins, and later Doris and Ernie, the little twins. From what my nan has told me, Mum was quite a mischievous kid who ran rings around her and Grandad. She then fell pregnant with Louis at the age of 18, about the same age Phoebe was when she had her little girl Olive, who we've just welcomed into our family. It's possible that Mum was such a handful as a child because of the tragic death of her older brother Jonathan, who was killed in an accident when he was just 3 years old. Mum was only 15 months at the time, but it must have had a traumatic effect on her. Over time, Mum would become easier to manage, and Nan would go on to have another child, my Auntie Rachel, but such a sad situation would have no doubt affected them all. I sometimes wonder if Mum's passion for children had anything to do with her brother's passing, especially from what Nan tells me about her. Whenever they went away on holiday and Mum disappeared, they'd find the nearest family with children, and that's where Mum would be. Mum needed children around her all the time, which is probably why she went on to have 7 of us. Even though Mum fell pregnant young, which was obviously hard for my Nan and Grandad, who were quite traditional and wanted their daughter to finish schooling, she went on to train as a midwife and have a successful career. Mum always knew what she wanted, which was to help bring life into this world, and she wasn't going to stop until she got there. Although she was very determined, Nan says that Mum tended to do everything a different way round to most people, such as doing her 4-year midwifery degree whilst trying to look after 3 children. Nan and Grandad were always around to help, but there were so many times when Mum would be up all night studying. I honestly don't know how she did it. She was incredible. Nan and Grandad's house had a study covered in textbooks and post-it notes all over the wall. And things got so tough at the end of her degree that she'd told Nan and Grandad she didn't think she could carry on. Apparently, Grandad told her, Jay, her name was Johanna, but that's what her parents called her, "You're nearly there, keep going, keep going." They were in awe of her, doing all that studying whilst looking after the 3 kids, and Nan says that's where we get our determination from. Whenever any of us kids want to do something, we go ahead and do it to the best of our ability. Before I had dreams of pursuing makeup, I wanted to be a midwife purely because Mum did it. She used to let us come onto the maternity ward with her so we could have a look at the babies and hold them. Afterwards, we'd follow her to the back room where they kept the baby bottles that they gave the new mums. She'd even let us take a few home for our dolls. I was so young, so I never thought about having to go through all the medical training or even having to deliver the babies. For me, it was just getting to see the babies every day that made me happy. We grew up in Doncaster in a little village called Bestseller. Home was a 3-bedroom house that would soon be far too small for the size of our family. Mum moved there with my brother Louis in 1998 as a single mum before I was born, and my soon-to-be dad lived right next door. As Dad tells the story, their eyes met as Mum was moving all her gear in, and it was love at first sight. Less than 8 months later, Dad moved in with her and Louis, and not long after that they were married. Mum and Dad married young, and their wedding photos are so precious. In one photo, they're looking into each other's eyes as they cut the cake. Dad has dark, shoulder-length hair. He's wearing round spectacles and a dark suit with a big burgundy tie tucked into the front. As for Mum, she's got a big smile on her face and looks so sweet and radiant. In another photo, she's posing with a bouquet of red and white roses inside the church. She's also wearing a crown of red and white roses on her head, plus pearls paired with a beautiful white off-the-shoulder dress with cute bow ties on the sleeves. Absolutely stunning. When I look at those photos, it reminds me of happy times with her, even though I'm not in them. It's a bittersweet feeling, but I'll cherish those photos forever. Nan says that when I was born, Louis cried when he held me for the first time. To be fair, he had waited 7.5 years for another sibling to come along. Because of the age difference, Louis had his own room in the Bestseller house, while I shared a room with Fizz, who came along 2 years after me, and eventually the big twins, Phoebe and Daisy. I was 6 when they were born in 2004, and obviously Fizz and I were so excited. And because there were 2 new babies, we didn't have to fight over them. The big twins felt the same way when Doris and Ernie were born in 2014. Having a big family comes with a lot of noise, so I had to be quite determined if I wanted to be heard. But Nan says I was very helpful, and she remembers me at the age of 6 casually walking around with the baby on my hip. I have lovely memories of my childhood at this time. We all went to a nice school around the corner from the house, and on our way home we'd go to the local village shop to buy a 20p worth of pick and mix sweets. That was such a highlight of our day. For the summer holidays, we'd all jump into our 7-seater car and drive to one of those key camp caravan resorts in the south of France. We wouldn't sleep the night before because of how excited we were. We looked forward to these holidays so much. Dad would spend most of his time in the pool and Fizz would be at the kids' club or meeting a new family. We wouldn't see her for the whole holiday. Every summer, Mum tried to put me in the kids' club to socialise, but I'd never want to go. I'd spend all of my time crying because I wanted to stay with my family. Being close to my mum and having all my siblings around me was everything I needed. Why would I want to make new friends? It's funny to think back to those times because I'm definitely more sociable now. I found my confidence and I'm less nervous and reserved in social situations. Even so, I'm not really one to just bring anyone into my life, and my inner circle of friends is quite small. Eventually, the 4 of us girls shared a room, all of us sleeping in 2 separate bunk beds. Our life was fun and chaotic back then, but I loved it. We had a few dogs too who added to the craziness. As everyone always says, Mum was very soft, so when we begged her for dogs, she eventually gave in, even though none of us had time to train them. We had to rehome a couple of them because it was just too much for us to handle. Even though Mum had loads of responsibilities to juggle in those days, nothing was ever too much for her. She was really the centre of our world. Mum seemed able to do it all, from midwifery to parenting, and she dedicated everything to us, which is something I'm so lucky to have experienced. Every time we'd go to her with a problem, she'd be there for us. And she had us in every club because she wanted us to figure out what we enjoyed. We used to dance, play football, go to gymnastics. Whatever it was, she encouraged us to be ambitious and follow our passions, just like she did. We didn't have a lot of money back then, which meant Mum was having to rotate the same few outfits while she constantly brought us new things. Don't get me wrong, we never went without, but there were so many of us and not enough money to go around. Sometimes money was so tight we couldn't afford to top up the meter key for electricity, so we all lit candles and played games. We didn't really need the telly because we had each other. Those times seem so far away, but they're still some of my favourite memories. It was all of us sticking together and mucking in. It's mind-blowing to think of how many of us there were. Louis was your typical older brother, a bit of a wind-up merchant, but very loving and protective. He had sister after sister come in, and that's hard for any big brother, but he was always brilliant with us. For as long as I can remember, Louis spent his time singing a lot and being musical. Most of the time he'd be out with friends or playing in his band. Fizz, on the other hand, was different to the rest of us. She was really smart, unique, outspoken and opinionated. In fact, she was almost too intelligent for her own good. Fizz never had to try and get A's, whereas I struggled academically. She also had the biggest heart, the kindest soul, and would do anything for us. Even though we were only 2 years apart, Fizz looked up to me as her big sister. But we also had a bit of a sisterly rivalry going on. As a child, I felt Fizz was trying to steal my light all the time, always wanting to do the same activities as me and constantly stealing my clothes and toys. At the time, I couldn't see it all for what it was, so we'd end up fighting about something silly like her trying to play with me when I didn't want my little sister involved. But as soon as we got put in separate rooms, we'd talk through the vents in the floor. Mum didn't realise that we could see each other through them. And as we grew older, we became best friends. Meanwhile, the big twins, Phoebe and Daisy, had each other. They were naughty, even as babies. I remember hearing about how they used to switch their name tags at nursery, and no one being able to tell them apart because they were so identical. As a toddler, I had a fringe cut straight across my forehead, and a little blonde bob that accentuated my big blue eyes, which probably took up most of my face for a while. It's so funny when I look back at photos of us all. It brings so many memories flooding back. As a kid growing up, I was determined at home, but never fit in with others at school and found it hard to make friends. Believe it or not, I was quite shy and struggled with my confidence. And when I started year 7, I had a bit of what you'd probably call puppy fat. I certainly wasn't happy with how I looked. I've always found it hard letting people in, mostly because I'm quite guarded. It's even true for my life now. There are a lot of acquaintances, and I generally get on with people, but I only have a handful of true friends and will only pursue relationships if they feel right. On a deeper level, most won't get my full energy unless I really feel a connection, and I struggle to relate to most people. Sometimes I wish I could be more forthcoming, the way my partner Lewis is. He has a big group of people around him and can make friends with anyone. I love that about him, but I can meet someone and know straight away that we'll never develop a deep friendship. Lewis tells me not to be so quick to judge, but for me it's an instinct, something I had to learn after Louis found fame. When your schoolmates all of a sudden see you in a different light and people start wanting to be your friend, you learn to be a bit more cautious about who you let in. It takes me a while to build that trust with people. They really have to earn it. For a while, I had a small group of friends that I kind of just fell into, and because I was quiet, no one else noticed me. The other kids around me, many of them were more outgoing, quite easily got stuck in with the group. The girls who were considered more popular were more confident. They looked good and were into their sports and lessons, whereas I was still finding my way. Around year 8, when I was about 12 years old and Louis went on The X Factor and became famous, those same girls suddenly wanted to know me. I remember the change feeling abrupt and weird, but not something that bothered me too much. I know it's fickle really, but if anything, I probably just enjoyed being more respected by people at school. Even if I had to answer all these annoying questions about my brother from kids I'd never even spoke to before. I had no idea just how much our lives were going to change. I used to take a coach to school because the drive was quite far, and as soon as I'd get on, everyone would be asking me about Louis. I even remember a few of the lads at school shouting stuff at me in the corridor like, "Let's roll out the red carpet," which I found embarrassing. When I started rolling with the cool crew, I did wonder if they liked me for me. I'm quite a good judge of character these days, so I can quickly tell if someone's interested in me because my brother's famous or because I have a lot of followers on Instagram, or if it's because they genuinely want to be friends and get to know me. But back then I was young and looked up to these kids. I didn't think about it too much. Over time, I started to recognise who was real and who was fake. In fact, I'm still friends with a few of those girls today, including my best friend Brits, who I've known since secondary school. From the moment Brits and I met, it was like we were always meant to be friends. We had an instant connection, and I've never met anyone else since that I've felt that with. Before we formed our friendship, she thought of me as someone who was dead quiet, but we got close on a school ski trip to Italy when we were 13. Brits and I were put in the same room with a friend of hers and a friend of mine. I still have this vivid memory of Brits having this bag of makeup and putting foundation on in the bathroom. I just thought she was so cool. It feels weird to say that now because I've been teaching her how to put on makeup for years, but back then she was just so funny, confident and outgoing, the type of girl who loved chatting to all the boys. It was almost like she was already a proper teenager, whereas I was still a little girl. It shouldn't really have worked, but Brits and I have been inseparable since school and have never once fallen out. She's still the life and soul of the party, the most crazy, wild person, and someone who has been a constant throughout all the ups and downs of my life. And now we are both experiencing motherhood together, which has been so special. While Mum was on night shifts, I'd hold the fort at home with Dad, who worked an office job during the day. I'd cook a bit of food for Fizz, Phoebe and Daisy and keep them entertained with games. If Mum was on a day shift and Dad was at work, my great nanny on my granddad's side would look after us, as she and great granddad lived within walking distance. My great nanny was a big part of our family and was able to cook and feed us because she was retired by then. But I liked helping out and it came quite naturally. When it came time to focus on my studies, however, I struggled. Mum wanted me to get into a grammar school, and to help me do that, she rented a property in the catchment area, even though she didn't have a lot of money. It probably sounds a bit dodgy, but I've heard from other people that their parents were doing the same. Inspectors carried out random checks on the property, so we all used to spend weekends there. And for us kids, the change of scenery was quite exciting. Mum just wanted to make sure I had the best education, but I'd never been very academic. Honestly, being in school made me feel thick. Subjects like maths used to jumble in my head and I struggled to get stuff to stick. I never had a problem getting good grades in art though, and the validation I used to receive made me feel like I was at least good at something. I'm not saying I was Picasso by any means, but I had some talent at least. Nan also used to praise my work, which was a lot coming from her because she's an amazing artist. Nothing I was learning in school compared to how I felt about makeup. I noticed myself becoming more and more obsessed with it, while at the same time becoming less and less interested in school, wondering what studying algebra was going to do for me. I'd watch YouTube videos and practice on my sisters in my free time. However, it never occurred to me that I could turn that into a serious career. So in the meantime, I struggled with school, thinking it was my only avenue towards making something of myself. And it took me a while to realise that there are different kinds of brains. Some absorb information well and some don't, and that's okay. Some brains are more suited to maths and science, while others are more suited to the arts. But when I was at school, I felt like something was wrong with me because I wasn't excelling in all of it, whereas I should have been allowed to focus on my natural gifts and interests. It's sad how one way of learning can put a lot of kids on the wrong foot, creating lots of self-doubt like it did for me. Come exam time, I'd go in feeling quite confident sometimes, but then my mind would go blank. It seemed unfair that I was being judged on that one exam, and I'd crumble under the pressure. So I didn't get the best grades. I remember my teachers recognising that I wasn't doing very well in subjects like maths, so I used to get offered extra support, like classes on the side. But even when I was taking foundation maths, for example, I still couldn't achieve a passing grade, which made me feel worse about myself. It was tough at the time, but I can see it in a different light now. I might not have been able to sit down and do algebra, but look what I've achieved. I must have had some kind of intelligence. Luckily, I had my mum around me to show me that just because I wasn't succeeding at school didn't mean I wouldn't succeed at all. But I imagine a lot of kids don't have that kind of support. Someone telling them that it's all about finding the path that's right for you. That it's about paying attention to your passions and obsessions. Do that and maybe you can turn what you love into a profession or a trade. Even though I was shy, I was quite the girly girl. I loved wearing crop tops that were too small for me and instantly became fascinated by makeup. Watching Mum put the products on, I wanted to know what each individual item did. Even though my memory has suffered from the grief and so many memories from my childhood are blurred, I have this really vivid image of looking at a liquid highlighter, putting it on my hand and asking Mum, "What's this for?" and her explaining that she used it to raise up or accentuate certain areas of her face. Wow, that's amazing, I thought. Then I'd pick up a bronzer and ask, "What does this do?" And she'd reply, "This is going to make you look more tanned." I was fascinated by how makeup could transform you, how it could change your whole mood and improve your confidence. I'd spend hours on the family computer researching makeup brands' websites. I knew all the different shades. Someone could show me a MAC lipstick and I'd know what it was called. Benefit was a brand that I was interested in at the time, and I must have been 12 when Mum said I could buy one item from them. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world. Mum usually let us experiment with a little bit of lip gloss and a little bit of mascara, so I chose a concealer the brand used to do called Erase Paste, which came in a little purple pot. Mum didn't really have the money to buy something like that, but she could clearly see how interested I was in makeup. And I can still see myself scraping that concealer down right into the corners, literally getting every last bit. I'd been able to have my makeup done during dance shows, but there was something different about having my own little product. On nights when I couldn't get to sleep, I used to think, right, just close your eyes and imagine that you're going into the makeup store. You can pick anything you want. Then I'd imagine picking all the stuff I wanted before finally falling asleep. Maybe it sounds silly, but it was such a support for me.